Episode 16 with Shane Hendrickson. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this one, and I'm glad we had a chance to fit this in my schedule on tour. And Shane is a Vancouver boy and a great bass player. I really enjoy his playing a lot, and he's been doing this a long time. I think you'll really like his story. Make sure you check out the whole thing. Listen to us on iTunes, In Session at Darren Walters, and also available on Google Play Music and Stitcher. Just Google In Session with Darren Walters. You'll find it lots of places. And let's get this thing going. Rolling.
Woohoo!
Shane Hendrickson in the house.
Yeah.
Nice to have you here.
Oh, thanks, man. Like two things here. I'm coming off a cold, so I'm going to be coughing every now and then.
That's
Sorry,
all right.
I got my fisherman friends here and my tea.
You're all
so
good.
hopefully it'll, won't be too bad. And secondly, man, I've never done one of these. This is awesome.
Either way.
Thanks. No, I've heard yours. No, you've been, man, you're rocking this. It's so good.
Thanks.
Like, it's so interesting. Even the guys I don't know, I listen to, and it's like, wow, that's really cool. Because everybody's got a good story, and everybody's got something you can learn from.
Yeah, you can relate, right? I think that's
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
part
Absolutely.
of it. It's like whatever the story is, there's a bit of you that probably understands exactly what they're talking about.
Been there or whatever. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's what I've been enjoying. I've just been enjoying the conversations.
Yeah. It's a good way just to get together with people and talk about stuff.
Yeah, because when it comes down to it, how often you're on the road with
Right.
usually with the set people and you hang out, but you really don't talk very deeply most of the time. Maybe something's going on in life, you might hear about it,
Right.
but you don't really sit down
Yeah.
and know everything about someone's life unless you've been with them since the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Probably someone like Corey you would know a lot about.
Sure.
But then, someone that's the cool thing about musicians. You can meet people and 10 years later you can meet up and it's like you just hung out, last week, right? You just automatically become friends.
Yeah. And you know what, it's like, you see people you haven't seen for a while, and instead of, you don't get into heavy conversation. It's usually something like, hey, you won't believe what happened on the road. And then that's another road story, story. You're going back and forth, and you're never really talking about, deep stuff about where they are, where they're from, what they did. Yeah. So it's great. It's a great venue to find out all the background on people.
Yeah, I think I've told the story, but when I started, I really didn't know. I kind of knew what I wanted to do with the podcast, but I really didn't know what direction it was going to go. We're going to talk real technical. We're going to talk about this.
Right.
So I had Jim Witter do the first one, and we've been friends for a long, long time. I knew it'd be just an easy talk, right?
Right.
And then when we got done, it's like, I know exactly what I want to do because it just kind of fell into place.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's been fun. I really enjoy it. It's something. It's a lot more work than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And having to learn a lot of stuff. Now you just you think about, well, you just post it and away you go. It's like, no, it's a lot more than that.
Yeah, right.
If you want to really be successful at it, but that's not really the point for me. But I want to get it out there for people to hear, and it takes a lot of time.
And you got to build it's like being in a band. You got to build an audience, all that stuff. It's word of mouth. It's everything, and man, I'm loving it. It's
cool.
Great. It's great.
So, you've been playing a long time.
Yeah, a long time. You know what? I don't even like to think about it because, you kind of go about your day-to-day stuff and you play your gigs and that. And then somebody starts asking about this stuff, and you start thinking, "Oh yeah, this was in 1990," and you start thinking that's not recent history. That's like a long time ago.
Yeah.
So when you actually start thinking about how long you've been doing it, it's mind-boggling because I can't believe I'm still in this business after all these years.
Yeah, it's because you think about it, you say, how long you been playing? Well, you think I've been playing a few years, and I think, crap, I've been playing 44 years.
Yeah, how does that happen?
Yeah.
It's like, no.
And it still feels great and still fresh, and it doesn't feel like you've run out of things to do or...
You want to think you want to keep doing it until you're not relevant anymore. And obviously we're still relevant.
Yeah.
We still have something to give. So I guess that's why we're still here.
Yeah, I remember remember the days where I always used to be the young guy
Yeah,
in the
right,
band. Like
right.
always the youngest guy by a long shot.
Yeah.
And I remember, well, quite a few years ago now, I was playing, I can't remember what gig it was, and I looked around and I was like, oh, crap.
I'm the old guy.
I'm the old guy. I'm the guy that I was, looking at
Yeah.
when I was younger going, oh, playing with the old guys. And I'm now the old guy. But I don't feel
Yeah.
like the old guy, but
And you don't look like the old. When you think back of those guys, you think, oh, they looked really old.
Yeah.
But I can't relate. I mean, I played with a bunch of old time fiddle guys when I was a kid, and 15 years old or whatever. And I was thinking, oh, they're so old and playing. And I'm thinking now, those guys were probably younger then than I am now.
Yeah.
But yet to me, they were just like these ancient guys, that, were in their 70s and 80s, but they probably weren't.
Yeah.
But to my young mind, they were just ancient.
It's funny now when I think about when I was younger, I wish I would have spent more time hanging with the older guys.
Right.
Not that I didn't, but you got along and you did your gigs, but I should have asked more questions, or I should have
Absolutely, yeah.
tried to learn more from them. But you don't think about that as much when you're younger. But now, when you get older, you feel I feel like I have something to give back
Yeah,
to
yeah.
people, and I if I have the opportunity, I'd try to, as long as you feel someone's open to it. There's this guy that I've been going to this little theater in Saskatchewan, and he's just a local school teacher. He's the tech at the theater. He doesn't really know audio at all, but he's kind of like the only guy in town that has any interest in being there.
Right.
So every time I go in, I'll sit there and spend 15 minutes with him and show him something different on the console. I don't know if he takes it. He's really interested in learning. Right. Last time I showed him what reverb was. He didn't know what reverb was. And
blew his mind. Whoa.
Yeah, it's like showed him how you route to it, how you turn it up, and in the time before they called in the panic, we had done a show with Red Green, and I had flown up, and I was relieving the guy that was out on the road, and so I got there at night after the show was done. The next morning, we're getting ready to leave, and they called us in a panic because my guy had changed the inputs of the channels. He did an internal patch different, right? So now channel 10, 11 were actually channel 22, 23, whatever. And he's just turning up those channels where his wireless mics are supposed to be, and there was nothing there. So I went over. I knew it's like, okay, I'm going to have to go over. There's no way I'm going to be able to tell him. So I made him a patch, and I showed him how to save and recall. I said, here's a patch that if anything happens, just always restart this one all the time. And it's a trick I've always learned. Everyone always puts on a console, their template at the beginning.
Right.
And that's the one that always gets burnt because everyone's using those first 10
Absolutely,
recall.
yeah.
I said, put it at the very, very end, like
Right.
199, whatever it is. That's where you put your template because no one ever gets down that far, right? So no one's going to even look there, and it's not going to get screwed up.
He's going to overwrite it.
So always put one at 0, always put one at the very end at 199, whatever ends up being whatever console. And that's the one you can always rely it's not going to get touched.
Right.
Anyways, I always feel that when I'm there, I have to teach him, and he appreciates it.
Yeah.
And instead of being angry that this guy doesn't know what he should know for that position, it's just like, you have to think, well, that's, it's not his fault. He's just trying to help out.
Yeah, and we were there once, and,
Oh, yeah.
and we all know how it feels, and to actually, help him out with judgment or anything. I mean, maybe when you get back to, to the buds and say, geez, this guy, but when he's there, you treat him with respect, and you try to teach him and give you a little of your knowledge, and because you would have loved that at the beginning, right?
Yeah, and he's super nice, and he's not cocky. He's not trying to be something he's not.
Yeah.
He's just, he's basically saying, help me.
Yeah. But I love new players, want to sit down with you. It's like, why the heck would you want to sit down with me? And then you think, okay, I guess I do have something to offer, and I got experience, and I got the stories and all that. I get it. But like you say, they have to be open.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the guy sitting there. Well, I played with this guy and I did this and I would, name dropping and stuff. And, the guys in Aaron's band used to give me a lot of grief. It was like, oh, here we go again, and then after a while you're just like, oh, I'll just shut up. And unless anybody really wants to know, and then you get the odd guy that would ask you something about who you played with and and in the back of your mind, you're thinking, this is probably a setup. This is probably the guy saying, hey, check this out. He's going to talk about it again. So you're always paranoid about telling your stories. So,
well, here we go. We're going to tell it.
Uh-oh.
So you grew up in Moose Jaw, right?
About an hour south. There's a little farming community called Crane Valley. And when I was growing up there was like 50 people.
Wow.
Like small. And when you grow up in that small of an area, you think, well, that's kind of like the world's like. You know? You think, oh, there's big cities. And even when I was a teenager, I was thinking, boy, before I die, I want to go to Calgary someday.
Yeah.
That's how small my world was. So
yeah.
It was tiny. There was, there wasn't any musicians in my town. My brother got a guitar from my grandma, I think, for Christmas. It was more like a dobro, one of those cheap, acoustics, and the strings are this high. And I think he got a Mel Bay book, and I got a ukulele or something, which I didn't want to play. And I think he lost interest. So I decided, well, I want to try to learn to play this thing. And I think he showed me a few chords in the Mel Bay book, showed you where you put your fingers. And we had this old tin shack out in the back of our house. And, summertime, it was like 110 degrees in that thing. And I'd be sitting there playing, my poor little fingers on this guitar. And eventually that's basically how I started learning. And that, I guess, was the trigger for what I wanted to do, even though I didn't know it.
Yeah.
It's like I wasn't like, hey, I'm going to be a star, because I'm from Crane Valley, Saskatchewan. Nobody's a star here. You have to be that guy over there in New York or whatever. Those are the stars. I don't have a chance, of doing this. And that was my attitude for a lot of years.
So Papa didn't have much in school as far as a music program?
There was no music program at all. I mean, I think our school, there was 9 in my graduation class.
Wow.
Like, that's how small it was. And it got down one every year till I think there was like 1 left. And the town has like 6 people in it now, and not much there anymore.
Yeah.
But there was no musicians around. I mean, there was younger or older guys than me that had albums and stuff. And even my folks didn't have a lot of music albums. They had comedy, like Bill Cosby albums and stuff like that. And we had like CKCK AM radio out of Regina, and it was playing like, Muskrat Love and Elvis stuff when Elvis wasn't really cool anymore. And it wasn't like I was listening to James Brown or anything anything cool. I didn't even know who that was until years later. But one nice thing is all the communities around there were kind of dying. They're getting smaller and smaller. And so at grade 7, they would bus other kids from other communities.
Yeah.
And there happened to be 3 guys that were, one's a couple fiddle player, one guy who was drummer and stuff like that. And they were coming to my school. So we kind of connected. We did some, jamming together, and we decided to start doing gigs, and it was like we knew 20 fiddle tunes, and we got another request for, this song, and you play it over and over and over again, and people didn't care. Like, it didn't cost them anything to get us, and they could still get just as drunk and dance just as much to us, squeaking away on a few tunes. And so that's kind of what it started, and then moved on to like, bigger small bands, and like I say, the old time fiddle bands. And
so where were you playing then?
Well, I was always bass, and I played guitar as a kid. But I think when I went to schools came together and I met those guys, we needed a bass player. And if memory serves me right, I think I was the first guy to give in. It's like, oh, okay, I'll play bass. And my folks didn't have cash back then, so I literally, this is where the fiddles come in, because I'm telling a heartbreaking story, but I literally had to walk and pick beer bottles and stuff out of the ditches to get enough money. And I remember my dad took me to Regina to the Sears Bergen basement, and there was this beat up old bass, and it was missing fret markers, and one of the pickups didn't work, and it was
half fretless.
Literally. And it was like $25, and I'd picked enough beer bottles to get that, and I can't remember what I did for an amp or anything like that. So anyways, that was my intro to playing bass, and thank God, because I'm a shitty guitar player. I always have been and always will be, but bass seemed to kind of work for me. So
Yeah.
that was it. And I was into it. And like I say, I started getting gigs with these other fiddle bands and learning off of them and all these standards. And, I was probably, I think back, I was probably terrible back then, but, these guys needed someone, and thank God they took a chance on a kid. I don't know if I would have done that,
Yeah.
A guy without even a license. My grandma had to drive me to the gigs and sit there all night and then drive me home.
Yeah. It's interesting when you start playing at that age, right? Because you're not thinking about anything.
Yeah.
But besides having fun.
Yeah, and I really miss that. I mean, even when I started playing bars and moose jaw and stuff like that, I lived for the weekend where you got to play.
Yeah.
You weren't trying to climb the ladder. You weren't trying to do anything else. You just wanted to play.
Yeah.
And then when a friend of mine said, when you put business after the word music, it takes all the fun out, because now it's a business and you have to keep relevant, or you have to keep moving up. And that now you're struggling. Now you're like working hard. Weekend guys in bars, they just want to get there and have a few beers and play some songs and have their friends tell them they're great, and that's all they want.
Yeah.
And I'm so envious of that, because I miss that.
Yeah, because it's not like that anymore.
No.
Like you said, you get to a point where now you're thinking about the show, you're thinking about this, and it's not, you're thinking what the other person's thinking about what you're playing. And
Absolutely, yeah.
So, yeah, I've been thinking about at home in the studio, I'm setting everything up just so anyone who wants to come in, you could, if I'm doing anything, everything's ready to go. There's this bass station, there's a guitar station.
Right.
Everything ready always. And I've just been thinking lately, I should do like maybe once a month, just whoever wants to come down for a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
And let's just plug in and play and have fun for no reason at all.
Right. Other than just to have fun.
Yeah. Let's forget about whatever.
Yeah.
And let's pick a few tunes that might be, fun or challenging or something. And say, hey, here are the tunes we're going to play or learn.
Right.
And when it gets together, you do a little practicing, and you come and you woodshed it and just have fun playing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I might spin this podcast into something like that too, where I wanted to do a video thing where maybe guests would be, a part of that.
Right.
Whole sit down and have fun,
Yeah. Or just bring someone in and like have just guys,
or just to hang,
and one guy that does it for a living or something, and you'll just, egos at the door, just have fun.
Yeah.
And for them, it's like, wow, I got to play with this guy, and it'd be a big deal for them, and for the ringer or whatever you want to call it, it would just be fun.
Yeah.
Getting no pressure, just
because it always ends up. Everyone, it gets to a point now where you feel, well, okay, there's a gig. Well, it's a rehearsal. How much is it for the rehearsal?
Yeah.
And I understand that part of it, but there's a part that, how come these people just don't get together and play?
Right.
And not worry about money?
Right.
And I think lots of times musicians are sitting around all day long and not really doing anything.
Right.
Not everybody, but there's a lot of, you waiting to the weekend or whatever the night your gig is, and why not get together and play?
Well, when I was playing with Natalie McMaster, it was like, that's their culture still.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't get together and have coffee. You get together, have coffee, and play. It's just like, there's a fiddle in every house in Cape Breton kind of thing. There's a piano in every house. It's just like, it's just part of visiting.
Yeah.
You play tunes. And I thought, wow, that is such a great thing. And these house parties they have all the time. And, there's people lined up to play, and music never stops. It goes for 8 hours and just never stops.
Yeah.
Because there's always something there to play, and they're not showing up, I'm playing with this guy. It's just like, oh, you need a piano player. Away we go. Oh, you need a fiddle, or I'll join you or whatever. It was just such a mind-blowing thing to see, because who does that?
Yeah, I know. And it's no attitude. I remember trying to remember who it was for. Maybe I shouldn't say. There's kind of jam. It was kind of a tribute to somebody back home years ago, and I went and showed up, and everyone was like, come on up and play for a little bit. And I brought my fiddle, and there was another fiddle player on stage. So I came up and they were basically, hey, Darren, come on up and play fiddle. So usually you just trade off, right?
Right.
So I went up and said, the fiddle player I knew who he was, but I never met him before. I said, hey, how you doing? Introduced myself, shook his hand and stuff. Said, do you mind if I, plug into your amp? And it was like, no. I was like, okay. So, and everyone is on stage is kind of looking, and it's like, what's going on over there? So I just went across the other side of the stage. There's a couple steel players went over there. So I went into one of the steel guitar players amps, which is great because I prefer that.
Right.
And he stayed on stage. So we started playing, and he just turned up and basically wouldn't let me play. So they were just playing like Chattahoochee and, Alan Jackson songs, and they would pass solos around, and he would just jump on and take the solo. And 4 songs went by, and I hadn't even a chance to take a solo because he jumped on every single one of them. And finally, the singer, everyone on stage felt how weird it was. And he finally said, all right, Darren, take one. And it just finally gave it to me, right? Just had to basically say, and I just felt like an idiot, It's like I played another tune and said, thanks. It's been fun, guys. I went back, and everyone at my table, they're like, what the heck was that? And I said, yeah, I have no idea. And there was no reason for it. But he
insecurity, though.
Yeah, it was just, and I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
And that was probably 10, 15 years ago. And I don't think I've ever run into that fiddle player again, but that will stay with me forever. And if anything ever came up that I need to, suggest a fiddle player, his name will never, ever come up. And it's just, I'm thinking, well, not that the fact that I wanted to feel like I needed to play or show off or anything. It was just common courtesy, right?
Yeah, right.
And it just,
this business, there's so many people out there and that are insecure, even for no reason. Like, they're great players, but they still have that insecurity. I remember with Natalie, we were touring with Bela Fleck and the Flecktones, like literally the greatest players in the world.
Yeah.
No attitude, no ego, no nothing. I could not believe it. These guys were just like, oh yeah, I play banjo, big deal. It isn't like I'm the great Bela Fleck and I'm the great Victor Wooten. And, I had to stand beside Vic every night on the encore to playing, the same song he's playing. And, I could barely play because here's this, my idol. And he's, if you do something, he'd like, hey, that's great. It's like,
yeah, it's
just absolutely zero attitude, zero ego. But the guys that, are maybe not as advanced, some of them just are hard to work with, hard to deal with. I mean, I remember CCMA, there was a house band, and the bass player was just so cold. And it's like, it's just, it was an after-hour party that they wanted us to play at. And, I was sick and I was in bed and I had to get out of bed to go down and play this thing at like 2 a.m. And it was just all this attitude. And I'm thinking, it's just drunk people. There's no, what's the point? And there was a couple basses on stage. And of course, I got handed the low end where all the other guys were playing the nice bass. And it's like, whatever.
Yeah.
If that floats your boat, go for it. And I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
I'll go up here and play my, whatever we did, 4 songs to the people out there. They don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care.
It's funny, yesterday, talking with Aaron, we were talking a bit about that. He's talking about you guys in the band and, working with really great musicians. And I told a little story years ago in the studio that always used great players, but then I at one point decided to go with a really, the A-list guys. Right. And one of the guys was Mike Francis, Pepe, and how great he was. So this is the weird thing that happened yesterday. And it's been quite a long time since I've talked with Pepe. So we talked about this in the podcast and, how great I thought he was, and he just nailed everything, and he was really fantastic. So we were done, and I had a couple hours, so I decided, let's drive downtown. I haven't been downtown for a while. I'm driving downtown, and my phone rings, and my phone's been ringing like from Miami, from New York, from Arizona the last few days, all these spam calls like constantly.
Right.
And I looked at it, it was Ontario, and I'm thinking, it's got to be another. But it said, well, maybe it isn't. It's Ontario. So I answer, and I said, hey, hello. And it says, hey, Darren, how's it going? It's Pepe. And I was like, holy crap. I was just talking about you. And it's literally been maybe 5 years since I've talked with him.
Wow.
And yeah, it was just the weirdest thing. And we talked for 30 minutes all the way to my drive into downtown. And, we talked about the studio. He used to do tons of work. And he said, yeah, I want to really come back. And I've been kind of away from the studio quite a bit the last few years just because I'm on the road a lot.
Right.
But I'm anxious, really, really anxious to get back in again. So anyways, it was just a weird thing. And we're having that conversation about, really A-list players and here it just kind of called out the blue right after I talked about him. It just freaked me out after we hung up. Like, wow, that was really weird.
Well, you know what? And here's the thing also about players like A-list or B-list. I always said I always wanted to teach or do a seminar with guys that want to be sidemen, because everybody's like, oh, how do you get the good gigs? Yeah, I mean, getting a good gig is hard, but keeping it is way harder.
Yeah.
Because, if you could be the best player in the world, and I've played with some great guys that never got callbacks. If you're a great player and you're bringing a lot of baggage on the road, if you're being an idiot, it doesn't matter how good you are, because the artist is like, I got enough shit to deal with.
Yeah.
I got interviews. I got this. Now I have to put out fires with you, and you're not getting along with the band, so the guys out there that aren't the greatest player, you still got just as much a chance, because if you come and you do a good job, you still got to do a good job.
Yeah.
We all hear about the stories of the elite players, and oh my God, he just came in and he blew everybody away. But if you don't have the road chops, you're not going to get a call back.
A lot of those really top guys aren't on the road anyways. I mean, they're doing studio
guys,
work.
Yeah. Or at a level where they don't have to interact.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're flying in, they're doing their thing, and they're out.
Yeah.
When you get in a rolling tube down the road for 6 weeks, and your personality's got to kind of match, or you got to be one of those people that just don't let things get to you.
Yeah.
Because that can, it can blow up. And yeah, like I say, great players just don't have the road chops.
Yeah.
You got to adapt. You got to have that personality where things don't get under your skin, all that stuff. And you also, a lot of these guys don't realize when you're on a tour, you're basically 24 hours a day representing the artist.
Yeah.
And people forget, they go to the bar and they get drunk and do stupid stuff. I can go to a bar and smash the place up, and nobody's going to go, oh, Shane Hendrickson was in my bar, wrecking things. They'll go, no, Aaron Pachette's bass player was there. So now it's on Aaron or Natalie or whoever I'm working with.
Yeah.
So you got to understand that you are representing them as soon as you start on that tour or on that gig or whatever. As soon as you get to town, if you fly in, you can't, if you're an idiot, you're going to lose the gig.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
And everyone will hear about it eventually.
Yeah.
It's a small community.
It's never, like I've heard stories of guys doing crazy things. I don't know their name, but I know who they played with.
Yeah.
So I'll say, what's his name's bass player, or drummer or whatever did this stupid thing. It affects the artist. So when the artist has to deal with that on top of everything else they have to do, you're going to lose the gig.
Yeah.
No matter how much you sit there and practice and know and look, how good you look and all that stuff. I mean, my saving grace is I look terrible, so I have to work even harder musically to keep my place in a band. I mean, I'm not a glam boy on stage and everybody's going, ooh, so I'm the old guy in the back that has to work twice as hard as the good looking guys in the front because I don't have that advantage.
Yeah. And there's part of, I think, you take a lot of the rock stars, right?
Right.
The guys, a lot of those guys aren't good looking guys or gals.
No.
But they have the right attitude, right?
Yeah, right.
They have the right swagger. They got the right, there's something that looks very rock star about them. And,
sure.
That's part of the thing that sells as well. But
yeah, I mean, Meatloaf had just as many groupies as any rock star, and look at that guy.
Yeah.
But it was his whole persona, right?
Yeah, exactly. So zipping back, eventually you start working with the Churko family.
Yeah,
right?
man, that was, if I start thinking back in my time, that was the gift right there. I was, you know what, there's a couple things led up to that. I had, I realized that I wasn't going to be a musician where I was, or, anything more than I was. And I had the chance to go to university. So I wasn't great in school. So, how do you go to university? And my dad wanted me to go to university. So I took this like vocational agriculture thing. And first year totally failed. But what I wanted to do was get to Saskatoon so I could play, find players. And I couldn't get arrested. I couldn't get gigs and all that. And I finally got a gig with this terrible band. And anyways, it all fell apart and I had to move back home. My dad was having some problems and needed some help on the farm. So I moved back to the farm and I met this guy, Gary Pequin, in Moose Jaw. And he was a standard, like he was the guy in Moose Jaw. Like he had the band that played every weekend and all the places, all the bars. And it was all older guys. And, I was the worst in the band. So I had the most to learn, which was great. I love being the worst guy in the band because it really ups your game, right?
Yeah,
instead of them coming down to your level, you have to go up to theirs. So it was great. And he knew the Churko family. And Roman, the dad, their mom was going off the road, and he was talking about it. And he said to me, you should call them. You should call them and see if they're really serious about looking. And I'm like, they're not going to hire me. So there's no point. And thank God he took it on himself to call.
Yeah. And
next thing they're down at the bar, we're playing some bar, and they all come down and sitting there, and I'm talking to them and got the gig, and I think for the Corey and Kevin, it was like, here's another young guy because, their mom was in the band and they're thinking long term. Here's a guy, he likes rock. He's good at country. He does all this stuff. We got the same influences. Perfect, And they hired me, and away I went, and we were on the road playing. It was back when you played 6-nighters every week.
Yeah.
And then Sunday you drive to the next one. And sometimes if you're lucky, you had 2 weeks at one place, so you had a day off. And they, there's the thing me and Jason always talk about, Jason Brinkworth talk about the prairie ethic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, guys, for some reason, the prairie guys, and maybe Ontario too, I know West Coast doesn't have it, but this prairie ethic about the work ethic, it's like you work hard. You don't just, and those guys had a great work ethic, and they wanted to write. They wanted to be more than just a club. The boys did. They wanted to be more than what they were. And so, man, we worked hard, and like I say, on the road. In those days, it was smoky bars and lots of hard travel and lots of it wasn't like a nice hotel room you're staying in, and just the worst places. But man, you were playing, and then when you weren't playing, you were learning new songs or you were working on your instrument, and it was the best thing that could happen to me. Like absolute, just a gift, like winning the musician's lottery, working with those guys and the whole family. And we did that, as Corey's already talked about. We did it, I don't know how many years we were on the road with them, or I was on the road with them. And then Corey got a call from Larry Wanigas, who was Katie Lang's manager, or maybe still is, that he had an act that he heard Corey was great. And I think it was the moment of realization that it's time to move on.
Yeah.
And Corey said, well, my brother and bass player, they can, if you're looking for them, they can do it too. And that was kind of the reason we moved out to Vancouver area, and in one place instead of moving around. And that just leapfrogged into everything else, and into the Underground Outlaws, the Explorer thing, the two band, same members, and we did every contest we could that you could win studio time at, because that was the only way we could afford it.
Oh, yeah.
We ended up winning this Canadian band contest and going over to Tokyo and playing there. And
I remember seeing that one back in the day.
It's
and
crazy. Like just, to win this, like nobody wins it. Somebody else wins it. Like I always said, it's not, we don't do it. And we actually won, and just the connections over there. And so, we were, the Larry Wanigas thing didn't last very long, the act we played with. And God, I was living in a van literally living in a van and using the Larry's office to, do bird baths in the morning, to freshen up. And Corey and his gal had a place, and Kevin and his family. He had a young family, and he was doing odd jobs and stuff. And it was just such a tough time. But, all this hard work and exposure we got landed us a deal with the guy who owned Little Mountain Studios at the time. And so literally we were going to a gig, playing from 9 till 2, packing up, going straight to the studio, working all night in the studio until they kicked us out in the morning because they needed it for a paying customer.
Yeah.
And then we'd catch a bit of sleep, just repeat. And when the money started running out, we'd go into the prairies and go to Calgary and do a week or two and get the big money and then come back and put it all into recording. And, it was crazy. We were in Little Mountain, and for a year we spent there. And, Bon Jovi was in there doing Slippery When Wet the first half of the year. And then Aerosmith was doing Pump the next half of the year. And we got so comfortable in there. And we started, we were in Studio B, all the big guys were in Studio A.
Yeah.
Now let's go see what they're doing. At middle of the night, they'd be gone.
Yeah.
We'd look through, Steven Tyler's lyrics and just brazen stuff, but it was like our second home.
Yeah.
And we would have been fired so many times, or we had kicked out of there if they knew half of what we were doing in there. But we even went got to a point where we're pulling reels of other people's stuff and listening to them and figuring out what all these producers were doing and the engineers. If that reel would have broke or something,
I know.
we would have still been paying the lawsuit off. But that's how we learned. And my God, Little Mountain, what a place to learn craft.
Yeah.
Like we had a engineer for a while, and then that's where Kevin Churko kind of got his chops, and Corey and all of us, working on this big SSL board and all the, it was all the top gear.
Yeah.
So the educational side of that was amazing. And it all stemmed from working our butts off.
Yeah.
Like just working hard and being the guys out there that were into the music and not so much into the partying or into the, the fame of being a musician. We just wanted to work hard. That's all we knew, really.
Yeah.
We all lived in a house together, and we had converted one of the only bedroom in the basement into like a little studio. And so it was, but when you're in your early 20s and stupid, you don't know any different. So you think that's just the way everybody does it. And it's not till after you hear, oh yeah, we were a little different.
Yeah. You figure, those hours pay off.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Because you think if you were, you're playing 6 nights a week or on the weekends, whatever, and you're just, out partying and drinking and then getting up at 4 in the afternoon.
Right.
And then you think, well, what would that have, led to?
Yeah.
And, it's, it's like that 10,000 hours thing, it's like you have to put that 10,000 hours in before you get good at something.
Well, do you want to do 10,000 hours of music or 10,000 hours of partying? Because you're going to be good at one and not the other.
Well, exactly. And then,
so, and there's nothing wrong with partying. I mean, if guys just want to do it, have fun, that's great. But if you're serious about it as a career, then you got to put in the time.
Yeah. And that was a good chance for you guys to, you figure you're playing that much and you're in the studio and how much you're learning. You probably had no idea at the time what you're learning.
Or just even the gift we had. It was like, oh, you want to give a studio? Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And then you think back, it's like, nobody got that. Nobody, how did we get it? But, we're nice guys. We're level-headed. We weren't idiots.
Yeah.
People liked us.
Yeah. I look back, I know when I was in my teens, and I was fortunate enough that we built a little a studio attached to the house.
Mm-hmm.
And what was a decent sized studio, and drum booth, vocal booth, big main room. It's still basically the studio I use now. And I was 13 or 14 around that time, and we went to the local music store in London, and I know we bought some equipment.
Right.
One pretty decent mic, and a mixing console. I don't even remember what the first recorder was, and nobody knew how to run it besides me. I mean, I didn't really know how to, but you'd plug it all in, and
right.
I sit back and I look now. I spent hours. Same thing. Like I spent all my time in there. Had a old TR-707 drum machine, and I would program stuff up, figure out how to use it. We eventually had a little sampler, and I would sample stuff and do MIDI stuff, right in the early days. And then I remember getting into a 24 track recorded, and then finally got into ADAT machines, and had this big PV. PV made this recording console. It was massive.
Right.
It was like bigger than this bed. So yeah, it was, and that's what I use now. I don't think about that was so much of my learning was sitting there and spending hours. Right. It's like you guys did.
Making mistakes and learning from those mistakes.
And I see younger people now, and you don't, some people obviously are spending the time, but a lot of people, it's so many distractions. There was nothing else for me to do. I was on the farm, and that's what we had, and that's, TV wasn't that great.
Yeah, same here.
And that's what we did. We played, and I programmed, and I recorded stuff. And
can you imagine having the technology we have now back then?
Oh, I would have freaked out.
Like it's sitting in your room.
But it's too easy.
Well, and then that's the problem. Like you can get a recording program, open it up, and be recording in minutes. Yeah. Not really understanding what you're doing, but you can do it.
Yeah, drop loops in. You got your drum thing already. You don't have to sit there and program the whole thing.
And then you can sit back and go, look what I just did.
Yeah.
But you're not getting into the meat and potatoes of the whole program and how the process, anything like that.
Yeah.
And and there's guys that are doing it, but it's just too easy to just make it mediocre. And there's so much mediocre stuff out there now because of it.
Yeah, I made my first album. I think I was 14. And that's what I call this. It was called Darren Walters in Session.
Right.
And that's how I came up with his name, In Session with Darren Walters podcast, because I played every instrument on the album. It was just me. And 14. It's still around. I haven't listened to it since probably I was 20, and I don't want to because I'm afraid to listen to it. Right. I'm really, really afraid. I'm thinking, oh my God, how bad is this, right?
Right.
But you look back, it's like, holy crap, I made an album.
Right, yeah.
And I was 14, and I played everything on it.
Amazing.
And thinking, wow, I wouldn't have the balls to do that now.
No, absolutely not. Because, not only that, but you have the means to call in people.
Yeah.
You can send them a track and go, hey, John Diamond, play the bass for me on this. Or, whereas back then, who did you know? You knew you were kind of
I was going to call John then. Yeah. I didn't know him. Or you just kind of did it. But that's the part of the thing is when you're younger, you're a little more carefree, and there's nobody judging you really besides yourself.
Nobody's saying you can't do that.
Yeah,
you just go, I'll just do it.
I gotta listen to it at one point.
I always have a hard time listening to the stuff I've played on because you can't listen to it as a whole. Like average listener listens to the song, and you're listening to the production. You're listening to every note you've played. You're listening to a glitch that you can hear that nobody else can hear. So. Yeah. It's so hard not to nitpick what you've done. The only time I can do it is if I hear a song and I've forgotten I played on it. Yeah. And then you're like, hey, that's pretty good. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. No, I played on that. So you stop enjoying it as soon as you realize that's you playing. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that. And oh yeah, that one part. And so, the magic is gone now. Now you can't listen to it as a song. You're listening to it as your part.
It's funny. I listen to older stuff that I recorded. And you sit there and it's like, God, who was playing on that session? And you can't remember who was on that session. You're trying to listen. And it's like, oh, okay, I know that's Craig Bignall on the drums because I recognize that fill. Or there's something little inflections that people do, but sometimes it's difficult. And you're thinking, guitar player, who is that?
Right. And you're waiting for that one little reminder, that one little lick or whatever.
And everybody has that, right?
Yeah, I know.
I certainly know I do. And it was funny. When I met up with Corey this summer, with Shania when they came through London, he was really nice and took us backstage. And I know you did that too.
Yeah.
And so he took me to his guitar setup station there. And so he gave me, each one of his fiddles to play. So I just did a little lick on each one, you know, a little thing. And then we left. My sister, she was with me, and she laughed. She says, "You play the same thing every time you pick up
right.
you know." I thought, you know what, I do every time. If someone were to give me an instrument or a fiddle to play, I instinctively play the same little licky thing every single time.
Well, you know what? When I was playing with Leahy, you know how many fiddle players in that band? It's the exact same.
Yeah,
they'd be playing, and it's the same thing every time they picked it up. Actually, not to get sidetracked, but the Corey's fiddles, the one of them is mine.
I played it.
Did you?
Yeah, he told me.
Oh,
yeah.
He give you a story, yeah.
Yeah.
Because he needed one. He was playing Letterman, and he needed a backup.
Yeah.
And my grandma gave me a fiddle when I was young, and I sucked at it. Like, it was horrible. It sounded like I was torturing cats all the time. And so it just became artwork to hang on the wall. And when he got the call, he was like, "I need a second fiddle." I says, "Well, do you think that's going to any good? Can you use it just..." So he went and got it, pickup and everything on it, and it's done more gigs than I have.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I played it for a second. I played all three of them.
Yeah,
and just quick. And it was funny because after we kind of had left the station, I wouldn't say I was nervous to play, but you know, you're around another guy and he hands you his instrument, and you know, it wasn't awkward or anything, but it just. There's something about it that was to some degree. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
And so we went through, I played each instrument, and I was just listening to the tonal thing, and we're just jacking it. And I knew in my back of my mind there was something different in each one.
Right.
But I wasn't paying that much attention. My thought was somewhere else. He's like, "Okay, you better not play something stupid." And then as we're leaving, he said, yeah, I've got this one tuned up, and I got this one tuned down. And I'm thinking, oh, that was it. and it, you know, immediately I would have noticed that any other day,
right?
But because I wasn't really concentrating on that, I was just kind of in this zone. I was like, "Oh crap, okay, just hand me. I better not drop it, or you know, do something stupid." I totally did not notice that I just played three violins that are completely different tunings, and as I walked away from that, it's like, "Oh, I'm such an idiot." You know, I can't believe I didn't really completely pick up. I mentally I knew something was different with him, but I wasn't.
Well, you're thinking tone, you're thinking feel, you're thinking, you know,
because I'm, you know, a stickler on pitch and all that stuff. So it was like I walked away. It was one of those things like, oh God, I felt like you know, right away I should have said, "Hey, it's just different tuning," but no, I didn't say. It's like walking. Hey, this car's left-handed and drive. You know, it's on the other side. I didn't notice.
Yeah,
but
and you know, he wouldn't have. That didn't register in his mind, but
no, I know that. But
it's so funny that we think that way all the time of ourselves.
Yeah, it was but that lick thing, yeah. And I knew I did it too, and I wasn't even paying attention to that. And we walked away. Yeah, my sister, I said, "You know, you play that same lick every single time." Yeah, I know.
Busted.
Yeah, it says he's never heard it. But you have a lot.
So next time we roll through, you're going to have to work up something else.
I know.
Yeah.
I'll just do it backwards. Yeah. So you were in Vancouver, and obviously doing the Underground Outlaws thing, and all that, and
it was. We tried to make it commercial, you know, but you can't unless sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
We're all players, and we became known as like a musician's band. Yeah. Musicians loved us. Regular people didn't really get it.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was a struggle. And the country thing we did worked a little better. We got some play and stuff, but even still, it was a little complicated, I would say, for a lot of people. And, you know, with that, the pressures of all that, the pressures of working nonstop and all that, and eventually, you know, Kevin had a young family, and we were making no money, and he had to bow out. And then, you know, eventually we just fractured. We just couldn't do it any longer.
Yeah.
And it was a huge blow, especially to me, you know, when these are guys I played with for years, and you know, again, history gives you perspective, and it was the best thing that could have happened. I mean, our whole career, I mean, Kevin got to hone his craft at one of the best studios at the time in the world on the best gear. All of us gained a reputation. We all got to work on our instruments, and you know, Kevin wouldn't be the world-class producer he is now without that experience. Corey wouldn't be on some of the biggest tours in the world without that experience. All that stuff came into play. And although it didn't work for us as a group, individually,
Yeah.
it was the thing that got us all to the next levels. Some of us a little higher than others, but
Yeah.
but you look back and you think that's what was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
We weren't supposed to stay a unit. We were all supposed to get really good and work hard and learn how to do stuff, and then go out and do it on our own.
Yeah. Same thing. Like you say, you don't realize what's happening when it's happening.
I know. And it's so tough being that, living in a van, sitting in a van every night in the dark, thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I living in a van when I could get a job? And, but that you're not going to be happy working and doing anything else. So for your craft, you suffer.
Yeah.
But then years down the road, you went, okay, that was a lesson that I needed to learn.
Yeah.
I had to have that happen. So I got, my attitude towards what I was doing, or even just to weed people out, like, the strong survive.
Yeah.
And most people would have got to that point and quit.
Yeah.
And the pull to music was just stronger. And even years later, when I was the sideman guy, tours only last so long, and then you're sitting around looking for the next gig. And I've quit music so many times, and something happens that draws you right back in.
Yeah.
After the Underground Outlaw thing, I went and I was a bike courier downtown Vancouver, and loved it. It was a great job. You don't make a lot of money, but your freedom. You just get to ride a bike all day as fast and hard as you can, and you're getting shape. And eventually something happened that drove me right back into music. And when I remember playing with Farmer's Daughter, and that dried up, and the only gig I could get was not grinding metal for this company that made these wheelchair lifts and stuff. It was just a quick buck. I had to pay the bills. And I sat there and I hated every second of it. Hated it. Couldn't wait to go home. And as soon as I got home, I just started thinking, oh, I got to do this again tomorrow. And then something came up that was better, and it was to do with music. So at some point I kind of went, okay, don't fight it. The dry periods are going to be dry. You're supposed to be doing this.
Yeah.
Just keep hanging in there. And 30 some years later, I'm still playing, I'm still relevant. So I guess it was supposed to be.
So you got the gig with Farmer's Daughter.
Yeah. It was so funny. I got a call and it was like, do you want to fill in? The bass player can't do it. And I was like, sure, no problem. And got in there, and it was kind of cool, and I came in and I did the homework and all that, and they dug what I did, and pretty soon I got the call for the actual gig, and they were a great bunch. They were fun, they had status, higher status than anybody I've ever played with before. So, I was on a bus, and it was all...
That's right, they had their bus, didn't they? Yeah.
Oh, it's the worst bus in the world, dude. 3 gals and guys in the band. So, guys, they had a bathroom on there. They took it out because they're like, we're tired of cleaning the bathroom, and no guy's going to do it, so let's just take it out. So, there's no can on the bus.
Yeah.
So, you were scared. You'd never drink water before you got on there. You were dry the whole time because... They're
dehydrated for years.
Well, and the one girl's dad was the manager, Jerry Lesky, and he was also the bus driver. He hated to stop unless you had to get fuel.
Yeah.
You didn't want to stop the bus. So God help you if you had to. If you were asking him to stop, you were seconds away from having an accident. So they were great though. They were playing theaters. They were playing big festivals and stuff, and it got me to a point where, you're playing the bigger shows, so you're getting a little name recognition, even though it's not you on the billboard, it's them, but people start knowing who you are, and you start making connections, you start meeting a lot of other people, and that was a bit of a springboard, and I was in kind of like the last couple of years of them. They were getting close to being done, again, they worked so hard.
I really like that group.
They were great.
Yeah.
They were great. They were fun, it wasn't that big, you think, well, 3 women, strong women on the road and stuff. And, there was stuff happening, but overall they're pretty cool, always professional. They're so professional. And we became such great friends too, And in fact, yesterday, my daughter's birthday party, Angela Kelman, the lead singer from there, she's been my, as close a friend as anybody, and she's there, and I just treasure all those friendships I made back then. And you met they had revolving players,
Yeah.
and I was kind of, when I came in, I was kind of the guy till the end. So I met a lot of different players coming and going and stuff. And so, you just kind of work your name up and people start knowing who you are and, talking about you. And
it's different in a group like that too, because it's not like Underground Outlaws where you're playing all the time. There's gigs every weekend.
Yeah, right.
When you get into that kind of status in Canada, it's sort of like, okay, we got a bunch of gigs in the summer.
Yeah, right.
And then you're off for a bit, or it's a little while to the next gig. And that's partially too why you get rotating players too, because you can't
keep them.
You can't keep people on a retainer or something, because there's not enough money for that. So you have to, lots of people come in and out of those situations.
Yeah, and you get your big cross Canada tour and you play from West Coast to East Coast. Well, now you can't play for a while.
Yeah,
and it's second biggest country in the world and such a low population. It's not like the States where you can spend a month in the upper northeast, and just doing gigs for a month there and then move into, the California area and doing a month of gigs. You can't do that here. There's just not enough big places to play.
Yeah.
The populations and stuff. So yeah, it's tough. And so you have these tours, it's feast or famine. It still is. You know, but the beautiful part is you learn how to save. You know, when money's rolling in, you hold on to it because that dry spell's coming up.
Yeah.
And it makes you better with dealing with money. At least for me it was anyway.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's important too. You got to learn how to do that. I mean,
sure.
I've been on the road with guys, they want to advance. I remember one guy, I can't remember who it was, but we're in Edmonton and he asked can I get an advance on the pay? And it was like earlier in the week and they were supposed to be paid on Friday. So they give him his whole advance. He went to West Edmonton Mall and bought a new camera and just blew it.
Right.
And it's just like, oh.
Yeah, no concept of saving. Yeah.
It's just sort of like, now you're even further out now, because now you've got a camera that you really didn't need. And now it's going to be, Friday's going to come and you already spent that money. So now you're going to wait till the next Friday.
Yeah.
It's
I remember guys you'd hear other bands, they do that all the time, get advance. And then they'd, at the end of some bands would owe money to the bar that they played at all week because they kept getting advances, blowing it on beer and whatever. And at the end of the week, they ended up having to pony up money because they blew right through all their cash.
Wow.
That's crazy. But, again, it weeds people out. You can't survive doing that.
No.
So you have to learn how to save a bit. And, it's just all part of the learning process. Either you do it or don't.
So Farmer Starter finished up and you said
Well, it's funny. And I was playing locally a fair bit, just cover bands and stuff. And I remember, I'm trying to think. I remember getting a call for Aaron just as a fill-in.
Yeah.
And I don't think he had an album out yet. And we're playing this place and I filled in and I remember Mitch, who was his guy at the time, is kind of his manager back then, I guess, saying, "Hey, do you want the gig?" And I'm like, "No, I don't want to start at the bottom and work my way up," and never thought anything about it. And to think now I'm still playing with the guy, I'm thinking it was late 90s maybe that I filled in. So it was so funny that it all came around to that. And then as it went along, I was filling in more and more and more. And eventually it got to a point where I was the guy with him.
Yeah.
And it was great. I you know what, Aaron, from the first time I've ever saw him, I thought he was one of the best performers out there. I still do. Yeah. I still think he's one of the best guys on stage out there. And I'm not just talking Canada. I'm talking worldwide.
Yeah.
Like in the country market, this guy just burns it. He leaves it all on stage every night. Just burns it up. And it's so crazy. Like, he'll sit there after a show as long as it takes. If there's fans that want to say hi or get a picture of that, he won't move until the last person. Yeah. Like, we'll be back at the hotel in bed sleeping, and he'll still be there signing or... Yeah. It's so crazy. Nobody does that. Everybody's like, okay, we got an hour, and then, sorry, folks, we got to go or whatever. He'll never do that. He'll forego sleep, everything else, just for his fans, and it's so crazy. I mean, it's so nice.
Yeah.
But I don't know anybody else that would do that.
Yeah, it's not a lot. It's a little more old school.
Right. You have
old school guys.
a little bit of access. That's it.
Yeah.
You know.
But yeah, I think nowadays it's not. You think that no, that's not the thing that you're not supposed to do that.
Right.
But it's fun because I work with a lot of old school folks and they do that. Red Green out on the road.
Yeah.
His lineups are just ridiculous.
I bet.
I mean, majority of the audience stays.
Right.
And like he said in the last podcast, if they would all stay if they didn't see the lineup,
Yeah, right.
And it's true. But that means a lot
Yeah.
to people, and people remember that.
Absolutely. And that's how his fan base is so loyal.
Yeah.
And because he's an approachable guy. He's for right or wrong. I don't know if that's the best thing, to be that approachable and that, that everybody can have a piece of you if you want.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's value in the mystique of the artist, but no, he's got zero ego, anything like that. He's self-deprecating. He's just he'll make fun of himself before anybody else will.
Yeah.
He's just as far as a, quote unquote boss, he's so easygoing. You can't offend him. You can't, he will play us a new single before it's released. And the first thing we do is start doing alternate lyrics to it, and making fun of it. And he's right in there, how many guys would put up with that?
Yeah.
But it just tells you what kind of guy he is. And he's easygoing. And I think sometimes he's a little too easygoing.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's been great. And all the years I've been with him, there's been rotating players, and they're all great players. And like I say, everybody you meet, there's an offshoot for some studio time or a new, fill-in gig here and there. And so it's such a great gig that way. And he's so good about, if you have another gig that you're committed to, no problem. Doesn't sweat it a bit. We have a roster of sub people now that come in and do it. And I could get a call to do a big gig tomorrow and say, hey, I can't do the show next week. And he'd be, that's great. Don't worry about it. Who does that, right? Everybody wants commitments. And when I got hired by Natalie, I didn't actually lose the gig, because he was like, yeah, no problem. We'll get subs until you're available. And it's always your gig.
That's awesome.
And I couldn't make his priority, just because she was a bigger act and the money was bigger and everything was bigger. And, but he was just like, yeah, I don't care. That's fine.
Yeah.
Just let me know when you're back. And you slide right back in.
So how did the Natalie gig come about?
Oh man. I got the Leahy gig first.
Yeah.
As a fill-in guy, through Corey. Well, actually, if you want to go back to the Underground Outlaw days, they were fans.
Right.
And I didn't know who Leahy was back then. And I didn't know who Leahy was until the Shania stuff happened, and they were the opening act.
Yeah.
And they would, and they would tell me, I'd meet some of the guys, and I was the celebrity. They weren't. It was like, oh my God, yeah, well, we're listening. And they knew more about Underground Outlaw music than I ever would remember. They were coming at stuff, and they loved it. And then even with Farmer's Daughter, if I was playing close by, they'd come out and hang. And
that's good.
And during the Shania time, they were like, they because all of them have a million kids.
Yeah.
So their bass player was their sister, and she was having another child at the time, and they needed a fill-in just for some of the tour. So I was like, oh God, that'd be great. Corey in the band and go play some Shania gigs as the opener. And I had a meeting with Danelle and everything. Anyways, it didn't work out. But they remember me for all those years. And lo and behold, later on, Siobhan, the bass player, was having another kid, and they called Corey and say, hey, do you think you'd be into it? So Corey gave him my number. And I remember it was a Saturday morning. I'd gigged the night before at some club or bar or something. And the phone rings at 6 a.m. And I'm like, oh my God. And I pick it. It was before telemarketers. So you always picked up the phone.
Yeah.
It was Siobhan Leahy, and she's like, hey, got your number here. It's Siobhan Leahy. Are you interested in? And I'm like, I'm half asleep. I'm saying, oh, I got gig. I'm sorry, I can't help you. I got gigs, but thanks for calling. She goes, hey, no problem. That's fine. And I hang up, and I'm laying in bed. I thought, you idiot. And thankfully I'd call display. So I call her back, and I said, hey, sorry, she goes, oh, it's 6 o'clock there. Oh my God, it's 9. And here, I never even thought of it. And I said, listen, can you give me a couple days on this? And I said, I'll clear my schedule if I can. And she's like, yeah, no problem. And so I cleared my schedule. I call her back, and she's like, okay, I need you in 10 days. The first gig's in north of Detroit. I'm like, okay. Yeah, it's Celtic. Yeah, no problem. To me, Celtic country, there's no different, right? So a couple days later, a package arrives, and it's their material to learn. It's live stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is crazy. Like this is not, there's no way I can play this. Like Siobhan, first of all, is a bass player that's never listened to another bass player. She's just listened to fiddle players all the time. So she has no idea of what the role of the bass is. She's playing these crazy intricate lines along with the fiddle. And I'm like, forget it. And then I stopped for a minute. I go, don't blow this. You can do this. And by then it was a week till a gig. So I said, you can do this. And then I went, you can do this without charts. You have to learn this stuff. You have to go in there and blow them away. And so I didn't eat or sleep for that whole week. I just sat there and I worked. And if I go on a run, I'd be listening to stuff on my run. You know, I just absorbed it. So I fly out there and meet them all at sound check, and we do sound check, and it goes great. And they say, oh, by the way, you got those CDs? Oh yeah, they're a year old. So we've added a different intro. We've added a part to this. I'm like, oh my God. And oh, by the way, there's 2 other songs that weren't out there, but you'll probably get them. And they're like, no, like I have no concept of what they're playing. You can't feel it. You can't.
Yeah.
Anyways, whatever. The planets aligned that night, and it was like I played with them for years. Everything went smooth. You know, they didn't even realize they had a sub. People in the audience didn't know. And, you know, Natalie's married to Danelle, who's the head, one of the head guy, the Leahy's. And she just happened to have a night off, and she was there. So she got to witness this whole thing. You know, this guy walking on stage, never played with him before, no charts, and nails the gig. So she was pretty excited about that. So I traveled with them for quite a long time, just as a sub, you know, here and there. And then I'd come back and I'd be playing with Aaron or doing local stuff. And then I got a call. Oh, sorry, this is a long story. But then I got a call from this guy from Italy. He's a crooner, young crooner guy. Yeah. And I'd actually done a small tour with him before, and I got a call back for it. And before we were playing small little places, and I think 5 shows in the States, and I'm playing those 5 shows, and we get to New York, and first time in New York, and oh my God, it's so exciting, and I can't wait to hit New York. And I get to my hotel room, and my phone rings, and it's Natalie, and it's like, hey, are you interested in being part of the band? I'm like, are you kidding? Of course I am. Yeah. Like another lottery I just won. Like, you know, this is Natalie. Like, if you don't know who she is, yeah, she's, you know, this great player, but she's like, you know, the Bruce Springsteen of her genre. You know, she's as big as they get. And I said, yeah, this would be great. And she says, okay, well, we have a couple Canada shows, and then we got to fly to France for a one-off, and then we go on tour with Bela Fleck and the Flecktones. I'm like, okay. And I think I had 6 weeks to learn this stuff. And
it's even more complicated.
Well, again, it's like it's its own style again. Yeah. It's like you can't feel the changes. Like it's crazy, you know. And unless you're born into it, you don't really ever have it part of your psyche. You don't absorb it like when these guys, you know, they hear the first thing and the way they go into the tune. Doesn't matter what, you know. They don't say, hey, can we play this song? They just start playing. Yeah. And they would forget that I'm not a Cape Brettoner. And at the time, most of the band was. And it was flying by the seat of my pants all the time. And it bothered me for the first little while, because I always like to know what the heck I'm supposed to be playing. Yeah. Especially when people are out there, you know, thousands of people out there paying $60+ a ticket. You don't want to be flailing, right? Yeah. And it took me a long time just to get comfortable with that. She would just yell E minor, and I'd go, okay, I know it starts in E minor then. Yeah. And then you'd go, right? Yeah. So, and in a way, Leahy was kind of like that. They had a structured set, but they would go off every now and then. Yeah. And they because they were a family, like they were all playing since the day they're born together.
Yeah, they can pull something they did 15 years ago on.
Away they go. And they were, oh God, I remember Youngtown, Ohio, Youngstown, Ohio, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
We get there and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, it's a symphony show today. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Oh, well, there's different arrangements. Okay. You're doing a show and there's a symphony behind you. That's what a symphony show is. And so I'm like, okay, can somebody sit down with me and explain this? Yeah, no problem. And of course, it never happens.
Yeah.
And then sound check comes and you're up there and with the orchestra and they start this big intro and it's just like one of those dreams you have where, you're on stage and not wearing any clothes or something like that. The whole orchestra is going and then the conductor stops them. And he looks directly at me and says, oh, do you need me to count you in? And I'm like, yeah. I didn't want to let them. So apparently I was supposed to start with the thing. So, I just kind of mute my strings and try to make some sound in rhythm with what they're doing. I had no idea what they're doing and stuff. So it was hard because, like I say, I came from, you practice the tunes and you get them dead on and stuff. But this, I just had to listen and try to follow along. And a lot of times I'm just a little bit behind, but again, man, I wasn't going to either of those gigs, I wasn't going to say no. And especially, I was a fan of the Flecktones from day one. And I'm like, I can't believe we're going to be touring. So I jumped on that right away and didn't matter. In Natalie, whatever she would say to me, I would never say no. I'd say, yep, I can do that. I can do that. She'd go, can you play this line? And it'd be this crazy line. And I go, yeah, no problem. And I'd say, I had a little recorder. And I'd say, can you just play it slow into this? And I'd stay up all night trying to get up to speed. But I just never said no. And I think that's what kept me in the gig, and the experience with her was just. Yeah,
it's great work ethic. That goes right back to, playing with the Churkles and Underground, those hours you'd spend. You just learn really good discipline. And that's missing with a lot of people today. They don't spend those hours or they
say no.
Yeah.
Like I could have said no and it probably wouldn't have meant anything, but if you say no enough times, they're going to find someone who says yes.
Yeah, it's like, oh, what's the rehearsal money? And and they're like, oh, how many? We get that back home. There's part of it where, it is a lot of work to do a one-off.
Yeah.
You got to learn 30 tunes or whatever it is. And, at the end of the day, you see your paycheck and the amount of hours you spent.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. But if you're not doing anything anyways.
Right. Why not?
Why not? Because it's those gigs that could get you that next gig.
Exactly. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you like said, you fill in for Leahy's and Natalie's there. And if you didn't, work your butt off, none of that extra stuff would have happened.
Well, I tell you what's solidified the gig for me with her is she saw that first one, but it was a year or so that went by before I got hired. But she had a new album out, her Blueprint album came out, and it had all the Nashville Cats on it. It had Sam Bush, it had Bela, it had Victor Wooten, and there was one tune with her and Vic just alone playing together, and Vic had done this really fast harmonic kind of thing at the start before it kicked in, and I went, that was great, that's awesome. So I sat there for a full week learning that. This is before I had her gig, and she had. They toured all the time together, or not together, but at the same time, because if you're away from home, why not do your tours? And she had a couple nights off, so she flew into our tour and hang out. And we were playing, I think, Santa Monica, and she's walking across the stage at sound check. So I start playing the intro, this really intricate intro, and you can just see her walking along, and she says something to Nell, walks back, and she stops, and it hits her what I'm playing. And I think that was the moment that solidified my position in our band, because it was such a hard part, and to her it was like, okay, this guy can step in and do this stuff. So I didn't have to learn it. It was cool. I loved listening to it, and I didn't need to take a week to perfect it, but I did. And that was another thing that got me the gig, and got me that gig. Her inner circle is all those guys, like, Mike McDonald sang on her album, and Yo-Yo Ma she played with a lot, and, she does Carnegie Hall, and, it's just crazy, her inner circle, and none of those people are any more important than anybody else. Like, she doesn't flaunt the fact that she hangs with these guys, because, Joe Blow from back home is just as important as these guys, and so it would just start blowing my mind that,
And then she marries Danelle.
And then she marries Danelle. It's
so we're like, well, okay, that's quite the combo.
Yeah, no kidding, right? It's like they call him the Celtic powerhouse, and it's true. Like, it's crazy.
I grew up when I was young, fiddle contest with Danelle. Danelle right? And I used to compete in. There was the Schreier triplets, and it was just. I mentioned in an earlier podcast, it was ridiculous. I mean, even when I was like 8, 9, 10, it was like, holy crap, and every once in a while I'd win, just, but it was like, it's like every time you'd show up and it'd be like, oh, Danelle's in the competition. Oh, crap.
Well, it must have killed him when you won though.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so.
You know what? It probably made him way better because I don't think he would, I know him very well, and he probably doesn't take losing very well, so it probably inspired him to even work harder. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was difficult. It always bummed me out when I seen who was. I think one of those things, you show up the contest, you never knew who was going to be in your category. Then you see everybody that shows up, and it's like, it was a powerhouse pack of fiddle players that were under 12, and I was like, holy crap. But yeah, now.
Well, I hear the stories of this. Like, Danelle always talked about these fiddle contests, and I think, back in Saskatchewan, every farm show or every little fair or whatever, they always had fiddle contests, and they weren't that great. I can't imagine going and actually seeing the talent that was there at the time and going, it must have been mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean,
for someone sitting out in the audience to see guys that good.
Yeah,
instead of some kid screeching away or some old guy that his bow's sliding all over the place, back and forth.
Yeah,
that's what we had.
Yeah, it was crazy, but I totally respect. I did a bunch of shows with Natalie too. I know the family, we were doing there's a big seniors convention that would happen all the time. She was playing with oh gosh, I can't remember his name right off the top of my head. Kind of a Celtic singer.
Oh yeah, something.
Yeah, I know. I can't believe I'm making. Can't remember his name. Anyways, yeah, I met her a few times, but I wouldn't know her. She wouldn't know me now. But Danelle, we certainly grew up families playing. And all that. So, and
you know what? They were the greatest people too. They're so much fun to be around off stage.
Yeah.
And, they'd always have these little things they would do, because it gets boring out there.
Yeah.
So they'd have challenges, and even like, card game, you wouldn't play for money. You'd play for humiliation. You had to do something, and like go downstairs to the front desk with your pants around your ankles asking for a roll of toilet paper, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or two of the guys have to do a slow dance in the lounge. So you would try as hard as you could to win. I remember golfing once with him. Me and one of the brothers teamed up against Danelle and one of his brothers, and I lost, and I had to. They carried with them a G-string and a Speedo for the bets, and I had to do a dance in front of everybody in this G-string, nothing but a G-string. It was the worst thing in the world, and I ended up I stopped playing cards and I stopped golfing with him because I couldn't do it.
Yeah,
but it was. Those are things that would.
Good thing it was pre-iPhone days.
Yeah. Well, actually, it wasn't.
Oh no.
But it was. That was the rule. You couldn't. Because that stuff would get out. But they were fun that way. They were just a laugh a minute, all of them. And then Natalie was just the easygoing. God, she was. You had to do a good job.
Yeah.
And if you were sliding at all, you would know, and you would feel 100 times worse. Just knowing that you let her down, kind of thing.
Yeah,
she was that kind of person, but she was so much fun, and all those Cape Breton people are crazy.
Yeah, they're so special people.
Well, if they're like probably within 15 minutes of meeting all of them, they were insulting me and stuff, and I learned later that that's how you are on the inside. If they're making fun of you, then they like you.
Yeah.
So it's just like, oh, okay, you got a lot to learn in that bunch, but it was so good, and just the gigs I played with her and the musicianship, and she had revolving musicians, and God, going back to my days growing up, they're not growing up, but listening to Victor Wooten, he had a drummer named J.D. Blair, and he was just fantastic. And he got the Shania gig, in the first, with the world tours and stuff. He was the guy, with the ski goggles on. And she hired him. So here's this guy that I idolize, and now I'm going to be on stage with him, and I'm like, what am I going to do? Like this is Victor Wooten's right hand guy at the time, and now I got to play with this guy. It was great. Like he was again one of those guys that saw good in everything. It doesn't matter. He would be see a terrible player and he would pick up on only the good things. And I remember first meeting him and first rehearsal, he sat down behind his kit, looked at me, and says, "Let's play." And I'm like, oh. And my fingers turned to sausages, and I don't remember any. Like I can't even play a lick. And anyways, it turned out great. So I got to play with him for like 6 years. My idol.
Yeah.
Awesome. That was the circle that Natalie was in, and
now you get to play with Jason Brinkworth.
Well, there you go.
I'm sorry.
I mean, sometimes you have to go backwards. No, you know what? I love Jason. He's
fantastic.
He's fantastic. He's such a fun guy. He's always up. He never is down. He's got so much energy. He's always thinking about how to make things better. He's a great guy. I love playing with that guy.
It's funny. I think it was last summer. Was it this summer? I can't remember. A friend of mine, Ron, who owns the PA shop in London, I did a podcast with him not long ago, and he was doing production at the I think it's the Boot Hill.
Oh yeah, Jamboree.
Yeah. So he was there, and he texted me, and he was like, "Holy crap, you wouldn't believe this rhythm section." And so who's playing? It's Aaron Pritchett. I'll say, "Oh yeah, those are my buddies." Yeah, they're really awesome. And he doesn't stop talking.
Right.
How good you guys were.
Wow.
And he sees everybody. He's a bass player from years ago. And yeah, he was just totally blown away.
It's funny. We've been playing, I guess, over 10 years now together with Aaron. And you know how, old married couples start looking like each other, and or people with pets start looking like their pets. We're looking like each other. We both got glasses. We kind of dress the same, and half the time you probably couldn't tell the difference between us. That's how tight we've gotten over the years. Yeah. Not only do we play tight, but we're starting to look exactly the
starting
same.
To look tight.
Yeah, he's I love that guy. I would go to battle with him any day of the week. He's so good.
Yeah, he's a nice guy for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I got to head downtown soon. But,
oops.
But
jeez, I haven't even got to my good stories yet.
What? Okay, go.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'll tell you my 2-drink minimum story.
All right.
Actually, I've got a few. I'll do them real quick.
No, yeah, go.
Again, the whole work ethic thing comes back to reward you. I got a call from a friend of mine who was booking the casinos and stuff and saw me play a lot, and I played with her a lot. And she says, "Hey, her other half was Mike Reno. Her name is Kathy St. Germain, and I played a few gigs with Mike Reno from Loverboy. And she goes, "Do you want to go down to the Caribbean and play with this classic rock thing?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's the Caribbean, sure, absolutely." She goes, "Yeah, the one guy's Bobby Kimball from Toto.
Nice.
Jimmy Jameson from Survivor. John Cafferty, the Beaver Brown Band on the Dark Side. Holy crap, like Toto. But I mean, they're all great, but Toto. Here's a guy that sang, all the songs, the high part in all the songs. So I get down there and, you meet all these guys, and they're not in their prime, back in the days, but they're still the guys.
Yeah.
So I get to do like 3 shows with these dudes, and you're sitting on stage and at sound check, and there they are. That's the guys. So I get to play all of, Rosanna and Hold a Line and Africa and all these classics with this guy, and through that, so I did that gig, and then I get another call. Hey, I got another special gig for you. And I was like, okay, what is it? Gene Simmons from Kiss. Yeah, he wants his kids to do a bunch of shows. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Sure. And I grew up on Kiss. Like Kiss is one of the biggest. He's one of the biggest reasons I play bass. The first time I heard that on one of the live albums, I was like, oh, I want to do that. So, sure enough, there we are. Meet his kids. There he is. First thing he does at the rehearsal, walks in. We're playing halfway through a song. Yeah. He walks in. We see him walk in. He walks right by me, goes to my amp, and starts changing the EQ.
No way.
It was the equivalent of a dog walking up and lifting its leg on you, right? So it was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. And I'd hired some local guys. They had a keyboard player from LA, Teddy Andreas, who was with Guns N' Roses and stuff like that. And he was a music director, and they wanted me to hire some players here. And, you know, I have a whole roster of good players I could have called, but I had to get good players that were even, you know, that could take some abuse, because I knew this was going to be a tough one.
Yeah.
Got some great guys, and we did 9 shows with them, and he was very difficult to work with.
Yeah.
His kids were unique. It was one of like.
So when you changed your tone, was it for the better or for the worse?
It was like a big fat 70s sound.
Yeah,
exactly
that's
what what he's going for. And it was funny. The first show we did was in a lounge, just to kind of a test thing, and they were doing jazz standards, like, but they were also doing rock, and he wanted the jazz to be like rocking, you know, like.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're doing it at last, da-da-da-da. You know, how do you make that heavy? So I got electric upright. I'm playing, because there's upright all over these songs. And and so we're playing, and I'm playing, you know, there he is, and the kids come on, and we're playing. I'm, you know, reading charts and playing, and this guy comes up and starts tapping my elbow. And I'm like, I said, hey, man, I'm in the middle of a song. He goes, Gene wants you to play harder. I'm like, what? He goes, Gene wants you to play harder. I'm like, harder? What does that mean? I'm playing as hard as I can. It's an upright. And after he comes up, and he's standing like 6 inches from my face, he's like, if you play like that tomorrow night, I'm going to find out where you live and hunt you down. He said, he's yelling at me, right? And I'm like, well, this is cool. I'm getting yelled at by Gene Simmons. And anyways, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to explain to him that I'm going through the PA, because he obviously doesn't understand that the guy at front of the house turns up and down. Yeah. So I'm thinking, okay, he just wants to see a big amp on stage. So I went and rented this humongous amp just for my upright. I was playing electric too, and had all these, you know, this little lounge thing. I had all these amps and everything, and that made him happy. And it scared the hell out of everybody in the lounge, because I was so loud. It was just disgusting. And it was, then he was all happy. And then he's like, he wants to invite us for dinner. He's like, hey, I'm after the show, we're going to have a dinner up there. And it was him and his wife and his family, and he invited the whole band, and my wife was there, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to go. And my wife's going, we got to go. Yeah. So we went up there, and the whole band's at the table. We're the last ones to show up, and we sit down, we get the menus, and they're all having a beer and talking, and so we order, and as soon as we order, the rest of all the band goes, okay, I got to go. So we'll see you. And I'm like, you bastards. So there's me and my wife, Gene and his wife, sitting there, and it's like, oh God. All I could do, I was just looking at my watch, thinking I got to get out of here. And he just talked about himself the whole time and all this stuff. And then it's like, okay, we got to go. And he's like, oh, I ordered a dessert tray. You got to stay for that. And I'm like, oh God. So, and it was really hard to talk to him. Like, he just, you know, he knew everything, and like, and rightly so. He's like one of the biggest rock gods in the world. And I never ever told him that he was the reason I played bass, because I thought, I am not going to tell him that. Not after all I've been through. No way. And the first gig was like, okay, we got through it. That's fine. And I had to fly to Boston for a Natalie show, and I thought, well, got through it, got paid. I'm done. I'm never going to do it again. And I get to Boston, I kick on my phone, and there's an email from somebody at genesimmons.com, and I'm like, what's this all about? And it was his accountant, and the accountant's like, well, Gene really liked what you did and all this stuff, and he wants to give you a bonus. Wow. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, do you want it direct deposit or a check? And I went, I want a check, because I want his signature, right? Yeah. The guy gave us like a $2,000 bonus. Wow. For the 2 shows. And I thought, well, now I can't say no. Yeah. And of course, we never got a bonus after that again. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And it was so hard, everyone. And thank God I had the right guys with me. But, you know, then again, that's what my hard work paid off. It got me that gig. And it got me a great story, you know. And, for sure. And it's funny sometimes how you think the greatest gig ever ends up not being that great. Yeah. You think, I get to work with this guy. And then the guy turns out to be just horrible to work with. Yeah. And, you know, and I don't, you know, he's filthy rich. He's filthy successful. I guess he has a right to be that way a bit. But I'm not, and I didn't, you know, not once did I ask him for his autograph or a picture. And I was just like, no, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. I have a tough time with that, because, you know, you meet certain people, and I just, getting my picture with somebody. Yeah, it seems weird. I have a, you know,
And I'll call home or something. I'll be talking to my mom or whatever. And say, yeah, I just met whoever. It's, did you get your picture? And it's like, no. So you better go get it. And it's like, no,
yeah,
I just
it's
can't.
weird.
I can't do it. It doesn't feel right to me. And
It seems kind of shallow. It seems like, hey, you're great. Oh, by the way, can I get a picture? So it can be about me.
yeah,
It's like, and if somebody does that to me, I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I have no problem with it. I don't think that of anybody else, but for me to do it, no, I can't do it.
yeah,
I can't do it unless somebody says, hey, get in there. I'll get a picture of you guys. And then I'm like, okay, that'll work. But yeah, it's crazy. And yeah. And I can tell you my Shania story.
sure.
I got the Vegas show twice and never played a note.
You got it twice?
Yeah, I got hired for the gig twice.
Oh yeah.
I went down Corey got me an audition when they were doing the residency there, and so I went down there, and again I knew what they needed. The Mutt Lange thing. He wasn't involved, but I know that's the level. Like you learn, you played exactly like the album. You learned the vocals like the album, and went down there and auditioned. There's 2 days of auditions, and nailed the first one. And JD was the drummer in that too.
Yeah,
they hired him back, so it was like I'm playing with Corey and JD. It was great.
Yeah,
this is going to be awesome, and so they're like, yeah, that's great, and went out with Corey and JD for dinner, and Corey's like, yeah, you're in. They want you to start thinking about endorsements, things like that, and I'm like, that's great, and the guy said, can you come back tomorrow, because we're auditioning a bunch of other guitar players and stuff, and so I said, sure, yeah. I went back, and they were happy and everything, and Corey had to fly out that day, and I had an extra day, so I said, hey, I'll drive you to the airport. So as we're going to the airport, he gets an email, and it's the old bass player that did all the tours with him.
Yeah.
And he played with Billy Joel, and Billy wasn't doing anything. So he said, hey, I'd like to come back, and I'll do that. It don't, the pay doesn't matter and all that stuff. And Corey's like, oh, shit. And he says, so they hired him because he'd played the show forever. And why wouldn't you hire him? And anyways, I guess at some point Billy Joel started getting busy again. So he said to them, or he said to the road manager, he said, I can do up till December, and then I'm out. So no problem. I get an email. I'm going to the island, and I get an email. Hey, you still interested? Yeah. He says, okay, well, this is happening, and he's going to play out these shows, and yeah. So if you're in, somebody will contact you. And I thought, yeah, that sounds great. So there's my second hire, and then I get an email back a couple weeks later saying, yeah, things have changed. So I literally got hired for the gig twice. Never stepped on stage once. And people are like, oh, that's awful. I think that's the best story in the world. Are you kidding? I didn't get the gig, but I got a great story out of it.
Yeah.
So it's another one of those things to add to the book. And
well, obviously it wasn't meant to be, right?
Yeah, and that's fine. I met some great people and got, it's great. And the guys that got the gig were awesome. Like I auditioned with a couple of the players, and they were all nervous back, waiting their turn. And I was talking to them like, don't be nervous. It's just do your thing, right?
Yeah.
And they actually got the gig, and it was great.
Yeah.
But I guess I was good enough to play with the big boys.
Oh, of course you are.
Even though I didn't get to play with the big boys, but so man, it's
Well, you never know what's around the corner, right?
And it's the hard work, the attitude.
Yeah.
I'm coming right back to where we started. It's just like if you got the work ethic, if you're willing to put in the time, and be patient, things will happen.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What's been lots of fun?
Yeah, man, this is great. I can't believe you even wanted to involve me in this.
Well, I think we could probably talk all afternoon.
That's probably yeah. Right.
What's the best place for people to reach out and find you?
You know what? I have a website, but I'm letting it go because I don't know. Do I need a website? Like, most of my gigs are word of mouth. So I have like the Facebook and the Instagram and all that stuff going on. But if you need to get a hold of me, ask someone.
Yeah.
they
Light a flare.
They probably know how to get a hold of me. And that's just the way it is now. When you're sitting here, you're doing this for long enough, people know who you are. So I got nothing to sell.
Yeah.
I got no
bass guitars you want to get rid of? Or?
No. I'm good at that. So I want to keep everything I got. But yeah, just I'm out there. You know who I play with.
You don't have that old bass guitar, the first one.
Oh no, I wish.
Don't you wish you had?
I wish I had that. I looked on the internet. I found it. Like I found a version of it. Yeah. And it's just a horrid looking thing, just ugly and all that. And I think, God, I wish I would have just had that. Just a reminder of where you come from, because you forget, right?
Yeah.
And that would have been great. Or God, I wish there was like YouTube or something back then, so I would have a copy of that first gig I did, or just how probably terrible I was.
People are lucky now because everything's documented so much.
Sure.
Back when there's so many things that I wish there was a copy of, I would have seen. And even I go back to my fiddle contest days, I wish there was. I think, maybe we had the old VHS recorders, ones where you strap the VHS machine around your side of you, and had these big cameras. Rest. You looked like you worked for CTV. But there's not much. I wish there was a lot more. I'm not sure if I'd want to watch it, but at least I know it's there.
At the same time too, you can't get away with anything. You can't have those nights where you're a bit of an idiot or anything these days, because everybody records everything. So I probably wouldn't be in the business if there was handheld recorders back then, because everybody would go, remember that guy did that? Yeah, let's watch it. And glad we didn't hire him.
Well, it's been a blast.
Thanks,
I really appreciate you driving. And I know it's a bit of a drive, and
it's Vancouver. Everything's a bit of a drive.
It is. I know. That's the one thing about this city. That sucks for that. But we'll have to do another one of these.
Maybe. Yeah, man. I probably got. I don't know if anybody's interested, but I got a million stories still, and
we'll maybe get you and Jason.
Oh my God, that'd be great.
On the same podcast.
Yeah. Next time you're in town, let me know, because I know a ton of people too that would love to do this.
Yeah, we'll do that for sure. All right. Once again, thanks for listening. Make sure you hop onto iTunes, hit the like button, rate, give us a 5 stars, please. That gets us up on the ratings. Available on Google Music, on Stitcher, and a bunch of other things. So just Google In Session with Darren Walters. You find the stuff. And reach out, say hello. Love to talk with you. And Shane, thanks again.
Hey, thank you, man.
It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this one. All right. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
You bet.